To all of God's chosen ones watching this right now, welcome. You are not here by accident. There is a divine purpose behind every moment, and this moment is one of them. You were chosen not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. Willing to grow, to question, to believe. You are drawn here by something greater than curiosity, something eternal. You are chosen because deep down, even in your moments of doubt, you still long for truth, healing, and peace. That's why I urge you, don't just watch a part of this video. Stay with me until the end. There is a message waiting here that might not just speak to you, it might awaken you. Before we dive deeper, let me share what this video is really about. In a world that pulls us in 1,000 directions, filled with anxiety, confusion, and emotional noise, many are asking the same questions. Where is God in my pain? Why do I feel so distant from Him even when I'm searching? Is faith real when I'm surrounded by silence? If these questions resonate with you, then this message was crafted with your soul in mind. Today, we're going to explore the depth of spiritual thought and what it means to discover a faith that goes beyond words. Faith that lives, breathes, and walks with you through every season of life. We will examine what it means to be spiritually awake in a sleeping world, how suffering can be a sacred invitation, and how divine healing doesn't always come with thunder but often with stillness. I invite you to open your heart, not just your ears. What if what you're seeking isn't something to be found, but something to be remembered? Now, I want to hear from you. This isn't just me speaking into a screen. This is a conversation between you and the one who brought you here. If you've ever felt like you're carrying burdens too heavy for your heart or questions too deep for answers, then let's walk this road together. I encourage you, watch until the very end, because in this journey, each part is a stepping stone toward a greater clarity. If this message speaks to you even just a little, please like the video to help share this light with others. If you're new here, I welcome you to become part of this growing community of truth seekers and faithful hearts by hitting that subscribe button. And let us know you're walking with us by commenting 777 below, a sign that you're ready for spiritual breakthrough. Now let's begin your journey right here, right now. Let me take you to the beginning of something most people try to avoid: the weight of pain. It's uncomfortable, it's raw, and yes, it often feels unfair. But I've come to realize something powerful. Pain is not the enemy, it's the teacher. It's the road sign that points us back when we've wandered too far from what matters. I've learned that the soul often grows best when comfort is stripped away, not because suffering is good in itself, but because it shakes us from the illusion that we're complete without God. When life gets too easy, we tend to forget. We start chasing pleasure as if it's the purpose. But pleasure without presence, joy without the giver, is empty. It leaves us full for a moment, but starving again soon after. In my reflections, I discovered that when we are too satisfied with what this world offers, we unknowingly place ourselves on a dangerous path. A path where we no longer recognize our need for something higher. That's why sometimes the things we think will satisfy us are intentionally left incomplete, not as punishment, but as invitation. I've seen it clearly. When the soul stops longing for God, it settles for lesser loves. So what does God do? In mercy, not wrath, He allows those worldly pleasures to lose their flavor. He makes sure they don't fulfill us the way we expected. Why? Because He's calling us back. He's reminding us that real satisfaction isn't found in what's temporary, it's found in communion with Him. You see, spiritual hunger isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a holy alarm that says you were made for more, and pain, though it seems like the enemy, becomes a doorway. It humbles us, it quiets the noise, it clears the room so that something eternal can finally speak. And when we listen, not with ears but with the heart, we realize it was never about the pain. It was always about what the pain could produce. A soul that remembers, returns, and rests in the arms of its Creator. That's the power of divine discomfort. Not to destroy you, but to realign you. That's where true healing begins. Sometimes, what your soul needs most isn't a solution, it's a voice. Not just any voice, but the one that speaks above the noise, cuts through the confusion and says something so simple, so steady that it stops your racing thoughts. That voice says, everything is going to be okay. And not because the world suddenly got easier, but because he's still in it with you. There's something unshakable about knowing you're not carrying your fears alone. You don't have to have it all figured out, you just have to hand it over. I've seen how heavy the weight of worry can be. The silent kind. The kind that keeps you up at night, that creeps into your chest during the day, that no one else seems to notice, but God does. That's what makes faith different from optimism. Optimism says things might get better. Faith says, even if they don't look better yet, I know who's holding me through it. That's the moment when trust becomes more than a word. It becomes strength, because when you place your burdens into God's hands, you're not letting go into nothing. You're surrendering into the arms of someone who knows exactly how to carry them. And here's the deeper truth I've come to understand. Trust isn't weakness, it's warfare. In a world that tells you to control everything, trust is resistance. It's a quiet rebellion that says, I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to stay close to the one who does. Every time you choose to believe when it would be easier to give up, you're winning a battle in the unseen. That's where real courage lives. Not in always feeling strong, but in returning to God even when you feel broken. This is the mystery of divine comfort. It doesn't always change the storm, but it changes you in the middle of it. You begin to see that peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the presence of God in the middle of it. And when you let that peace take root, you start to breathe differently, think differently, live differently. That's when healing begins, not when your circumstances shift, but when your heart decides to trust again. There's a kind of rest your soul can't find in sleep. It's not about closing your eyes. It's about quieting what's been spinning in your mind for too long. The anxiety, the fear, the thoughts that say you're not enough, or that everything might fall apart if you stop trying so hard. But here's what I've come to learn. You are never meant to carry that alone. There's a promise that reaches into the most restless places of your spirit. Cast all your cares on Him, because He cares for you. That's not a suggestion, that's a lifeline. When everything around you feels uncertain, when you don't know what's next, the world will scream for your attention. It'll tell you to hustle harder, worry more, and control everything. But God whispers something different. He says, come sit with me. Let the noise fall away for a moment. Let your heart breathe again. Because what your soul needs is not more information. It needs presence. His presence. And in that presence, there is no rejection, no abandonment, no shame. Only rest, reassurance, and a reminder that you're never alone. And when fear rises up, and it will, remember this. Fear is not always a lack of faith. Sometimes it's just a sign that we've been listening to the wrong voice for too long. The voice of worry, of doubt, of past failures. But God's voice is different. It doesn't shake you, it steadies you. It reminds you that your future is not in the hands of chaos, but in the hands of a Father who never lets go. That's not just spiritual talk, that's soul reality. I've learned to stop letting the world set the rhythm for my peace. Because the world is loud, unstable, and unpredictable. But the presence of God is steady, unshaken, and always near. So if your spirit's been tired, if you've been holding your breath in anxiety, this is your reminder to exhale. Release it. Rest in Him. Your soul doesn't need more pressure, it needs more peace. And peace doesn't come from escape, it comes from surrender. That's how your spirit begins to heal, not by fixing everything, but by finally trusting the one who never leaves. Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you slowed down enough to truly notice what matters? Not your to-do list, not your deadlines, but your people, your peace, your soul. We live in a culture obsessed with tomorrow, obsessed with what's next, what could go wrong, or what might fall apart if we don't stay 10 steps ahead. But I've realized something. Constantly worrying about the future won't change it. It'll just rob you of the present. And the present is where your calling lives. Not out there in the unknown, but right here, in the faces of your family and the condition of your spirit. What if the most sacred ground you'll ever stand on is not some far-off destination but your own home? The kitchen table where your family gathers? The quiet moments you spend in prayer? The decisions you make to love when it's hard, to forgive when it's unfair? That's where faith is forged. Not in grand gestures, but in daily obedience. In how you treat the ones closest to you when no one is watching. And I've learnt that you don't need to chase miracles. Sometimes the miracle is choosing peace over pride, kindness over revenge, presence over performance. Now, here's what ties it all together. When you care for your family and nurture your spiritual life, you create space for God to restore your soul. That restoration isn't just emotional, it's holy, it's deep, it's healing that reaches into the core of who you are. I remember the words from Psalm 23 not as poetry, but as a personal truth. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. And that restoration doesn't always happen in a church or a mountain. It happens in the daily rhythms of grace, in the places where you stop striving and start surrendering. So if you're feeling scattered or lost in all the noise, come back to what's eternal. Love your family, guard your spirit, choose forgiveness even when it costs you something, because that's where God moves. That's where healing begins, not in the chaos of what-ifs, but in the quiet commitment to what truly matters. That's not just faith, it's wisdom, and it will shape not only your life, but the legacy you leave behind. Let me say this clearly. Miracles aren't just ancient stories or rare events reserved for a chosen few. They're not distant, unreachable moments locked in the past. Miracles are real and they still happen. But here's the thing. They don't always come with lightning or thunder. Sometimes they show up quietly, like peace in the middle of chaos, or hope when everything says give up. I've seen with my own eyes how God steps into natural reality and does something supernatural. Not for show, but to remind us He's here, that He never left, that He still moves. In a world that feels like it's spinning faster, growing louder, and leaning darker, it's easy to wonder if God is still paying attention. It's easy to believe that we're on our own. But I've come to believe the opposite. The more unstable the world becomes, the more God leans in. Miracles are His way of proving that even when we feel powerless, He isn't. And when we pray, not just out of habit, but with faith that dares to expect, we give Him room to act. Prayer isn't wishful thinking, it's alignment. It's saying, God, I know You can, and I trust You will. When I wrote about miracles, I didn't describe them as magic or illusions. I saw them as signatures, divine fingerprints that say, I was here. Every miracle carries a message. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are seen, known, and deeply loved by the One who holds all power. But to see them, you have to look with eyes of faith, because sometimes the miracle isn't what changes around you. It's what changes inside you. The shift in your mindset, the peace that makes no sense, the strength you didn't think you had, that too is God. So when the world shakes, don't panic, pray. When things fall apart, don't curse the moment, call on heaven. Because miracles aren't limited by headlines or human logic. They break in when hope seems impossible and remind us that no situation is ever too far gone. I've learned that if you dare to believe, even in the dark, you will start to recognize miracles for what they are, living proof that God is still in the story. And that's not fantasy. That's faith at work. There's something sacred about writing a name down. It may seem simple, but in the spiritual realm, it's an act of deep faith. When you write the name of someone you love in your prayer journal, you're not just hoping for good things. You're calling heaven into their story. You're saying, God, I believe You can reach them where I can't. I believe You see them even when they don't see You. That's the heart of intercession. It's standing in the gap for someone else, believing on their behalf when they might not know how to believe yet. That's powerful. That's how faith moves beyond self. In times like these, when fear is flooding the world and people are overwhelmed by uncertainty, this is when faith becomes a light. While many panic at what they see, the children of God are invited to look deeper, not at what's falling apart, but at what God is building underneath it all. And when you begin to pray, not just for yourself, but for your family, your friends, the people God placed in your life, you become part of that divine rebuilding. That's when miracles show up. Because miracles aren't just random. They're often the result of someone's quiet, persistent prayer. I've seen how heaven responds to hearts that cry out, not just for their own healing, but for the healing of others. That's the kind of prayer that shifts atmospheres. That's the kind of faith that catches God's attention. So don't underestimate what happens when you write down a name and lift it up in prayer. It's more than ink on a page. It's a declaration that you believe God is still writing their story, that no one is beyond reach. While the world trembles, your prayers can be the very ground where peace begins to grow. And as you keep praying, keep believing, you'll begin to witness things that others miss. Open doors, softened hearts, unexplainable protection, all because you chose to believe that God listens and responds. That's the miracle. That's the reward of interceding love. Faith is never wasted when it's poured out for someone else. In fact, that's when it becomes unstoppable. Storms have a way of revealing what we're really holding on to. When the ground shakes beneath you, when the plans fall apart, when the nights are long and the answers feel silent, that's when you realize whether your faith is just something you say or something you lean on. I've come to see that the most important thing you can do in those moments isn't to figure everything out, but simply to reach out and hold God's hand. Because no matter how dark it gets, His hand is already reaching for yours. Pain has a way of making us feel forgotten, but I want to tell you something real. God sees every tear you've cried in silence. He knows the weight behind the smile you show the world, and more than that, He feels it with you. He is not a distant observer to your suffering. He is present in it. His heart moves when yours breaks. And when life pushes you to your limit, He doesn't step back. He leans in. You may not see Him, but you can be sure of this. He's never let go of you, not for 1 second. It is a tenderness to God that often gets overlooked. We talk about His power, His authority, and yes, those are real. But in your lowest moments, what you need most is His gentleness, His willingness to sit with you in the ache, to whisper, "You're not alone. I'm still here." I've learned that blessings aren't always loud. Sometimes they come as quiet strength when you expected collapse. Protection doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like endurance. And that endurance comes when you know He's holding you through it all. So here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to climb your way out of the storm to be close to God. You just have to stop running and reach for His hand. That's where comfort lives. That's where healing begins. Not always in the absence of the storm, but in the presence of the one who walks through it with you. Hold tight. He's not just willing to bless you, He's ready. And when God moves, He always carries His children with care. Strength doesn't always look like the absence of fear. Sometimes real strength is choosing to move forward, even when your heart is trembling. Courage doesn't mean you never feel afraid. It means you refuse to let fear decide the direction of your life. And there's a reason God keeps whispering the same words throughout Scripture. Do not be afraid. Be strong. Be courageous. He's not saying it because life will always be easy. He's saying it because He knows it won't. And yet, even in the thick of it, you're never alone. I've held on to the words in Joshua 1:9 more times than I can count. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. That's not just inspiration, that's identity. It means you were built for battles, not because you're tough enough, but because God is faithful enough. It means the presence of the storm doesn't mean the absence of God. In fact, it's in the storm where you often see just how close He really is. There's something holy about choosing courage when everything around you says retreat. When the voices of doubt try to define you, when setbacks tempt you to shrink back. That's your moment to remember who walks beside you. You don't have to manufacture strength. You just have to lean into His. You're not expected to have it all figured out, just to trust the one who does. And when you do, when you take one brave step at a time, you'll start to realize something important. You are never walking alone. Courage is not a feeling, it's a decision. a decision to believe that no matter what waits around the corner, God has already gone ahead of you. He's prepared the ground beneath your feet. He's written strength into your story. And when the fear creeps in, whisper this to your soul: I don't walk by what I see, I walk by who is with me. That truth will carry you through every unknown, every battle, every storm. So take heart, not because life guarantees safety, but because your faith guarantees you're never forsaken. And that's the kind of courage that can't be shaken. Have you ever felt an ache inside you that nothing in this world seems to satisfy? Not sadness, not fear, but a longing, a deep, wordless hunger for something more. I've felt it too, and I've come to understand that it's not a flaw in our design, it's a clue. That quiet ache is sacred. It's the evidence that your soul remembers a home it hasn't fully seen yet. You weren't built for emptiness, for chasing what fades, or for settling into what barely fills you. You were created for eternity, and when the world feels too small, it's often because your spirit is stretching toward heaven. In my reflections, I began to see that the things we chase, success, comfort, recognition, often promise fulfillment but rarely deliver it for long. They're shadows, echoes. They stir something in us, but they don't complete us. That's because they were never meant to. They exist to point beyond themselves. When nothing here fully satisfies, that's not a sign something's wrong. It's a sign you were made for more than here. You were designed for a world where peace never ends, love never fades, and joy never dies. That longing is not disappointment, it's direction. And here's where the journey gets deeper. The goal isn't to reject every good thing on earth, but to see them rightly. Enjoy the beauty of this world, yes, but don't confuse it for the source. Let it remind you of the greater beauty ahead. Let every moment of wonder lift your eyes, not trap your heart. The goal is not escape, it's alignment. To let the ache inside you turn into worship instead of weariness. To let it guide you toward the one who placed eternity in your heart in the first place. So if you've been feeling out of place, like nothing quite fits, take heart. That's not a reason to despair, it's a reason to hope. Because the ache in your soul is holy, and every step you take in faith is one step closer to the place where that longing will finally rest. You were made for more, and deep down you've known it all along. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix, a tiredness that runs deeper than your body. It's the weariness of carrying emotional burdens, silent fears, invisible wounds. And if you've felt that kind of tired, then you already know. What your soul needs isn't escape, it needs rest. Not the kind the world offers, but the kind only God can give. A sacred stillness that reaches your core and says, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. That's the invitation God extends, not just to the strong, not just to the righteous, but to anyone who's tired of pretending they're okay. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. That's what Jesus said in Matthew 11. But he didn't stop there, he followed it with a promise. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. What moved me wasn't just the idea of rest, it was the heart behind it. Gentle, humble, present. In a world that constantly asks for more, God offers less. Less striving, less pressure, less fear. And in that sacred less, you find more than you expected. You find peace. I've come to believe that divine rest isn't about stepping away from responsibility, it's about learning how to carry life differently. With God beside you, with His rhythm in your breath and His strength beneath your steps. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to hold everything together. He's already holding you, and not only does He offer rest, He offers protection. Body, mind, and soul. He hears your whispered prayers, your hidden aches, and He surrounds you with care so complete that even illness, fear, and threat lose their grip when you stand in His covering. So if you're tired, not just physically but spiritually, this is your moment to let go. Not give up, but give over. Give over the stress, the fear, the control. Rest isn't weakness, it's worship, it's trust, and it's yours right now if you're willing to receive it. In His presence, your soul can breathe again, and maybe for the first time in a long time, you'll remember what it feels like to truly rest. There are moments in life when the silence gets loud, when you look around and realize the people you thought would stay didn't. The support you counted on fades. The world keeps moving, and somehow you feel left behind. Maybe it's the loneliness that lingers after loss, or the weight of responsibility you never asked for. And in that space, it's easy to wonder, has everyone, even God, forgotten me? But here's the truth I've come to know deep in my soul. People may walk away, but God never does. Not once, not for a second. His presence isn't seasonal, His love doesn't expire. I've walked through seasons where nothing made sense, where prayers felt unanswered, strength felt drained, and the future looked too foggy to even hope for. But in those very seasons, something holy began to take root. Not comfort, not clarity, but perseverance. A kind of strength that only grows in the soil of struggle. That's what Paul wrote about in Romans 5. We rejoice in our sufferings because suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And that kind of hope doesn't disappoint. Because it's not based on the world, it's grounded in the unshakable love of God. Let's be honest, pain can make you question everything. But if you stay in it with open hands and an honest heart, you'll find that it can also shape everything. It builds a depth in you that easy days never could. It burns away what's shallow and brings out what's eternal. Your faith becomes less about having answers and more about trusting the one who does. That's not weakness, that's maturity. That's what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. And here's where it gets personal. God doesn't just care about your soul in theory, He cares about your family, your health, your future. All the pieces that keep you up at night are already in His hands. Not ignored, not forgotten, held, covered, cared for with precision and love. When everyone else is too distracted, too broken, or too distant to carry your pain, He still sees every part of you, not just the strong parts, but the fragile ones too. So if you've ever felt abandoned, overlooked, or simply unseen, know this: God hasn't left you. He's not pacing outside your problems. He's standing right in the middle of them with you. And He's not just watching, He's working all things together for your good. That's not just a promise, it's who He is. And that's the kind of hope you can hold on to, always. Sometimes the real test of faith isn't in how loud you pray, but in how quietly you obey when everything around you feels silent. When the heavens feel closed and the path looks foggy, it takes something deeper than emotion to keep going. That's when faith steps out of theory and becomes something real, something lived. It's easy to trust when everything feels blessed, when the signs are clear, when the prayers are answered on cue. But what about when they're not? What about when all you have left is obedience without emotion, belief without proof, loyalty without clarity? In those moments, I've discovered something powerful. That's when your faith becomes a weapon, a compass, a key. Strong faith doesn't just survive the dark, it leads you through it. It unlocks doors that fear will never touch. It moves mountains that logic can't explain. Faith isn't passive, it's active surrender. And when you choose to keep walking, even with shaking knees, you're not falling behind, you're walking right into the arms of God's plan. In my own reflections, I wrote something that still rings true today. The enemy is never more at risk than when a believer, no longer feeling God's presence, looks around at the emptiness, asks why they've been abandoned, and still chooses to obey. That, to me, is the greatest kind of strength, because it's not based on feelings, it's rooted in love. And love, when it holds on without needing a reward, becomes the most powerful spiritual force you can carry. That's when the enemy starts to panic, not when you're loud, but when you're steady. And here's what I've seen time and again. When your faith stays grounded in silence, doors begin to open. Maybe not the ones you expected, but the ones that lead to deeper purpose, divine alignment, and true peace. Faith isn't just about outcomes, it's about trust. And trust, when tested, always leads to transformation. If you keep showing up, even when nothing changes, something changes in you, and eventually, everything around you starts to shift. So don't underestimate what's happening when you're walking in the dark but refusing to quit. That's not weakness. That's warfare. That's worship, and more than anything, that's proof that your steps are still on holy ground, even when they feel unnoticed. Because faith that holds on in the silence is the kind of faith that shakes heaven and changes everything. Real change doesn't begin with behavior, it begins with belief. Before your actions shift, your mind has to be renewed. And before your habits are broken, your heart has to be convinced that something greater is possible. I've learned this firsthand. You don't break free from darkness just by trying harder. You break free when the light of God becomes brighter than the shadows you've lived in. That's why spiritual transformation always begins in the mind. When God starts to rewrite your thoughts, He's not just improving you, He's redeeming you from the inside out. We often talk about sin like it's only about right and wrong, but it's deeper than that. Sin is anything that pulls you away from the truth of who you were created to be. And over time it becomes a pattern, a mindset. You begin to accept shame as identity, fear as normal, and compromise as survival. But here's the hope. God never leaves you stuck there. He doesn't just call you to be different. He gives you the power to become different. And that power doesn't come through guilt, it comes through grace. There's a divine promise written into your story, whether you've seen it or not. God has already prepared a way for you to be free from the habits that have haunted your thinking. Whether it's addiction, anger, insecurity, or cycles of self-sabotage, none of it is stronger than the Spirit of God working in you. He's not asking you to clean yourself up and then come close. He's saying, come close so I can clean what you can't. And in that surrender, something incredible begins to happen. Your desires start to shift. Your thoughts begin to filter through peace instead of pressure. You start craving what's pure instead of what once numbed the pain. As your mind transforms, so does your direction. You stop chasing things that drain you, and you start pursuing what restores you. You stop entertaining lies that made you feel small, and you begin walking in truth that sets you free. This is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. It's not about religion, it's about freedom. And freedom doesn't mean you'll never struggle again. It means the struggle doesn't own you anymore. So if you've been stuck in the same cycle, hear this. You're not too far gone. You're not too broken. The same God who created your mind is the same one who can renew it. He wants to give you the strength to turn away from the old and walk boldly into the new. And when you do, you won't just feel better, you'll live differently. Because a transformed mind always leads to a liberated life. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is closing in, like every opportunity has passed you by, like your past is louder than your future, like grace is for everyone else but you. But let me offer you a truth that can silence every lie. New doors are opening for you, even if you can't see them yet. And these aren't just ordinary doors, they are doors designed by God, shaped by mercy and opened by His hand alone. You don't have to force your way in, you simply have to walk forward in faith, knowing that what's ahead of you is covered in divine purpose. Here's the reality we often forget. You've already been forgiven, you're already accepted, you've already been given a seat at the table not because you earned it, but because God chose to extend it. And in His kingdom, you're not tolerated, you're treasured. That means your past can't disqualify you, your mistakes can't erase you, and your brokenness doesn't diminish your value. You're seen, respected, and called worthy, not by people's standards, but by the grace of the one who made you. That kind of grace is not small, it's extravagant. It overflows into every corner of your story, even the ones you tried to hide. And this is where Scripture grounds us. In Romans chapter 8, I find the words that anchor my soul. If God is for us, who can be against us? What can separate us from His love? Trouble, hardship, danger, shame? Not a single one. Not even death, not demons, not the past, not the future. Nothing, absolutely nothing can pull you out of the arms of God once you're in His grace. That's not a comforting phrase, that's a spiritual reality. And when you truly believe that, you stop begging for acceptance, you start walking in confidence. So if you've been wondering whether there's still a way forward, I want you to hear this clearly. Yes, there is. And it's not just any way. It's a way lit by love, paved with purpose, and strengthened by grace. God's not done with you. In fact, He's just getting started. Your story is not stuck. It's unfolding. And the chapters ahead are filled with more hope than you've dared to imagine. All you have to do now is take the next step, not in fear, but in faith. Because the one who holds the door open also walks through it with you. And that changes everything. There will come a time in your journey when you're tempted to lower your head, not out of humility, but out of defeat. When people question your worth, when enemies rise against you with lies, judgment, or hate, everything in you might want to shrink back and disappear. But that is not who you are, and that is not how your story ends. You were not created to live in shame, fear, or silence. You were created to stand not in pride, but in dignity, and not because of what you've done, but because of who walks beside you. When God is on your side, you don't bow to intimidation, you rise in quiet strength. I've seen it time and again. The world tries to measure your worth by your failures. Your enemies want to define you by your weakest moment. But the truth is this: God has the final word over your life. Not your past, not your critics, not even the storms that tried to destroy you. And His word declares that you are chosen, protected, and covered by grace. That means when others try to push you down, heaven is already lifting you up. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. Just keep walking with your head high and your spirit anchored. God is writing the part of your story that no one else can touch. And yes, there will be oceans to cross, seasons that feel too deep, too wild, too overwhelming, but you will not sink, not because you're strong enough to swim, but because God's hand will always reach beneath the surface to pull you back up. That's what He does. He doesn't just let you float, He carries you through. Even when the wind roars and the waters rise, His rescue is never late. The enemy may shout that you're drowning, but God has already whispered that you're delivered. So hold on to your dignity. Don't trade your integrity just to please people who are never meant to define your worth. Don't let the opinions of others turn you into someone you're not. You belong to a King who calls you by name, not by failure. And when He looks at you, He doesn't see brokenness, He sees purpose. You are not abandoned. You are not defeated. You are held, you are protected, and you are seen. Let this be the moment you decide, I will not bow to fear. I will not surrender to shame. I will walk forward with dignity because I know who I belong to. And no matter how high the waves rise, I will not go under because my God still reigns over every storm. There comes a point in every believer's journey where effort alone just isn't enough. You pray, you push, you try to stay strong, but something still feels missing. That's when you start to realize this walk with God was never meant to be powered by your own strength. Faith isn't about proving how much you can endure. It's about learning how to depend completely on the one who already overcame. You weren't created to carry the weight of life by sheer will. You were created to walk forward in grace. I've come to understand that faith isn't a product of human determination. It's a response to divine invitation. It's waking up every day and choosing to trust even when you don't feel capable. It's taking that next step not because you feel brave, but because you believe God is walking with you. When I wrote about this in my reflections, I saw clearly that real faith isn't rooted in feelings or mental strength. It's rooted in grace. And grace isn't something you earn, it's something you receive over and over in your weakness, in your doubt, in your trying and failing and trying again. If you're exhausted from trying to be enough, then maybe it's time to let go of that pressure. Maybe the point was never about being enough in the first place. Maybe it's about discovering that God's grace is sufficient, more than sufficient, for every gap you can't fill. That's where transformation begins, when you stop relying on your effort and start leaning into His endless mercy. Because the truth is, the strongest faith doesn't come from those who never fall. It comes from those who keep rising, not by might, not by resolve, but by grace. And here's what I know to be true. When you move by grace, your journey may not be faster, but it will be fuller. Your heart will grow softer, not harder. Your spirit will become lighter, not heavier, and your connection to God will become deeper, not based on performance, but on presence. You'll begin to walk not with the pressure to achieve, but with the freedom to believe, not in yourself, but in the one who called you. So if you've been asking, how do I keep going when I've run out of strength? The answer is simple but profound: by grace. Let grace carry what your will cannot. Let grace lead when your vision is clouded. Let grace remind you that you were never meant to walk this road alone. And when you do, you'll discover that every step you take in faith is not about striving harder, it's about trusting deeper. There is a kind of security this world can't offer, not in bank accounts, alarm systems, or even in well-laid plans. Because fear doesn't always come from what we see, it creeps in through what we can't control. Disease, danger, uncertainty, they all whisper the same question: where is your safety? And the answer, though simple, is powerful. True safety isn't found in the absence of threats, it's found in the presence of God. The safest place you'll ever stand is not behind locked doors, but beneath the shadow of the Almighty. Psalm 91 says it better than I ever could. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. That's not a metaphor for peace, it's a promise of protection. It means that when you choose to stay close to God, you don't have to be shaken by what's happening around you. He becomes your refuge, your fortress, your hiding place, not just spiritually, but emotionally and physically. He guards your heart, your mind, and yes, even your health. His protection isn't partial, it's complete. I've seen how fear can paralyze a person, how it can creep in like a slow poison, convincing you that you're vulnerable, exposed, and forgotten. But when you live under the covering of God, fear loses its grip. It may knock at your door, but it can't make a home in your heart. Why? Because God's faithfulness is your shield. His presence becomes your armor. And even when darkness surrounds you, you walk in light, because He walks with you. That's why the words of Psalm 91 aren't just poetic, they're prophetic. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. These are not empty reassurances, they are declarations of divine authority. When the world panics, you remain anchored. When chaos spreads, you stand firm, not because you're immune to hardship, but because you're covered by grace. So if you've been living in fear, afraid of sickness, disaster, or the unknown, this is your reminder to return to the shelter that never fails. You don't have to run to temporary solutions. Just run to the one who has never lost a battle. His presence is your strong tower. And when you rest under His wings, no shadow, no sickness, no fear can break through. That's not just hope, that's protection. And it's yours today. There's a moment in your walk with God when you realize you weren't just saved to survive, you were chosen to lead. Not by your own merit, not by your background or titles, but by divine appointment. You've been anointed, set apart for something greater than comfort. God has placed His hand on your life because there's a generation waiting for your obedience. And no matter how ordinary you may feel, you've been called to carry something extraordinary. Miracles won't just happen around you, they'll happen through you. You weren't chosen to impress, you were chosen to impact. And that impact begins with humility. Because nothing will close the door faster on your calling than pride disguised as confidence. God lifts up those who stay low before Him. He doesn't need perfect voices. He looks for surrendered hearts. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be willing. Willing to speak when He says speak, to move when He says move, to lead when it feels easier to hide. The oil of anointing on your life is not for your elevation. It's for His glory. It's meant to heal, to guide, to awaken purpose in others. I've seen what happens when people forget that. When they start chasing applause instead of presence. When the platform becomes the goal and the miracle becomes a performance. That's not leadership. That's misdirection. But when you stay grounded, when you remember that every gift, every open door, every breakthrough is a result of God's grace, not your greatness, you become the kind of leader the world needs. One who serves before speaking, one who listens before leading, one who points up, instead of looking down. This generation is starving for real, not for perfection, not for charisma, but for authenticity. They need someone who's walked through fire, but didn't let the fire define them. Someone who's seen God move and isn't afraid to give him the credit. That someone is you. You don't need a crown, you already carry a mantle. And with that mantle comes responsibility, to walk humbly, to lead boldly, and to remember that your strength isn't in your story, it's in the one who's writing it. So stay close to the source, keep your spirit in check, and never let pride steal what was born in surrender. Because when God moves through you, it won't be about your name going higher. It'll be about his name being lifted. That's how leaders are made, that's how miracles flow, and that's how generations are changed. Through someone just like you, who stayed low enough for God to shine high. Mornings are sacred, not because they're quiet, but because they're full of potential. Before the noise of the world rushes in, before your mind starts racing through responsibilities and worries, there's a brief, holy moment. It's the space where God gently invites you to trade pressure for presence. But that moment can disappear quickly if you don't choose it. Every day you're handed two options: carry the weight of your own thoughts, or surrender them to the one who can handle them better than you ever could. That's why what you do first thing in the morning matters more than you think. When I sat with this truth in my reflections, I began to understand that the mind doesn't default to peace, it defaults to chaos. Worries rush in like wild animals the moment your eyes open. Deadlines, conversations, regrets, fears. And unless you intentionally push those voices back, you'll miss the still, small whisper of God calling your name. His voice isn't loud, but it's steady. It won't fight for your attention like fear does, but it waits patiently for your response. You don't have to be perfect to hear it, you just have to be present. This is why I now believe that how you start your day shapes how you live your day. If you begin with worry, you'll carry anxiety everywhere you go. But if you begin with worship, you'll carry peace. When you open your heart before you open your schedule, something shifts inside you. You're no longer reacting to life, you're walking through it with divine direction. You begin to hear God more clearly, not because he's speaking louder, but because you've silenced the noise that usually drowns him out. So tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, pause, take a breath. Say, God, this is your day. Guide my thoughts, quiet my fears, speak to me. It doesn't have to be long, it just has to be honest. And as you make that a habit, you'll find that each day becomes more than just a list of tasks. It becomes an opportunity to walk closely with the one who created you. That's not routine, that's relationship. And that's where real peace begins, not in controlling the day, but in surrendering it. There's something powerful about a heart that chooses to hope, even when it's tired, especially when it's tired. Because often, just before the blessing comes, the pressure intensifies. Your patience wears thin, the delay feels unbearable. And in those moments, it's easy to let negativity take over, complaints start to slip into your prayers, frustration fills your thoughts. But here's the truth. The way you handle the waiting shapes the way you'll receive the blessing. And the danger isn't that the blessing won't come. It's that you'll miss it because your heart was too full of bitterness to hold it. I've learned that every blessing has a weight to it. It requires space. And if your spirit is already filled with resentment, comparison, or discouragement, there won't be room left to carry what God is about to give. That's why protecting your attitude in the waiting is not optional, it's essential. Complaining may feel honest in the moment, but it has a way of poisoning your perspective. It blinds you to what God is doing in the background. It convinces you that He's late, when in reality, He's right on time. Every delay has a purpose. Every silence is strategic. In my own reflections, I saw how often we fill our spiritual cup with complaints when it was meant to be filled with expectation. God never asked us to pretend the journey was easy, but He did invite us to trust Him through it. And trust looks like gratitude in motion. It looks like choosing to say, even if I don't see it yet, I believe something good is coming. That mindset doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what you're ready to receive. It prepares your heart to handle the blessing with humility and joy. So if you feel like nothing is shifting, If you're tempted to give up or lash out, don't. This might be the final stretch. The enemy always attacks hardest right before breakthrough. Don't let him steal the joy of what's on the way by dragging you into complaints. Choose hope, speak life, clear out your heart so God can fill it with something new. The blessing isn't just coming, it's close. And when it arrives, you'll look back and realize the waiting wasn't wasted, it was preparation. Keep your heart open, keep your cup clean, let hope rise again. Because rescue is nearer than you think, and the reward will be worth every moment you chose to believe. Not everyone will understand the light you carry. Some will try to dim it, others will question it, and a few will even resent it. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence reminds them of a power they can't control, a truth they've tried to forget, or a boldness they haven't yet dared to live. That's why it's so important you remember who you are. Not just on the good days when everything is clear, but on the hard days when the weight of rejection or resistance tries to tell you otherwise. You were never meant to shrink just to make others comfortable. You weren't created to blend in or apologize for your identity. You were designed to stand out, not in pride, but in purpose. You are a child of God, crafted in His image, filled with His Spirit, and called by His name. That truth alone should shape the way you carry yourself every single day. You don't have to try to impress the world when you were born to reflect heaven. I've seen how people, out of insecurity, envy, or fear, will try to make you feel small. They'll downplay your victories, question your calling, or dismiss your passion. But their opinion is not your mirror. Their projections are not your truth. Your reflection is found in the one who formed you. And God doesn't create anything halfway. He doesn't do average or accidental. He speaks greatness into existence. And when He breathed life into you, He placed a piece of eternity in your soul. That's why you don't quite fit into the mold. That's why you walk differently, think differently, dream bigger, and love deeper. You don't carry your confidence because life has been easy. You carry it because you know the God who held you in every battle. You know what it costs to get here. You've fought through seasons that tried to destroy your joy. You've stood in rooms where your presence wasn't welcomed, and still you remained kind. Still you remained faithful. That's not weakness, that's spiritual strength. That's what happens when your foundation isn't built on popularity, but on promise. And yes, that anointing makes some people uncomfortable, especially those who operate in fear or darkness. They may not understand it, but they can sense it. Something about you shifts the atmosphere. It's not just in what you say, it's in your presence, in your peace, in your boldness to keep believing when others have stopped. That's the Holy Spirit within you. And that's why the enemy targets you, not because you're weak, but because you're effective, because your faith exposes his lies, because your courage reminds others that fear isn't in control. And when you refuse to be intimidated, you become dangerous, not to people, but to the systems and strongholds that try to keep people bound. You don't have to raise your voice to be powerful. You just have to walk in truth. Truth that doesn't shake when others doubt. Truth that doesn't bow to intimidation. Truth that stands even when it's misunderstood. But here's the challenge. Don't let their resistance make you forget your position. Don't water yourself down just to fit into their version of who you should be. Don't lower your voice so others won't feel threatened. Stay humble, yes, but stay firm. You were not given the Spirit of God to stay silent. You were given it to walk in truth, to live in freedom, and to lead others by example. You carry more than opinions. You carry divine purpose, and that purpose is not dependent on anyone's approval. You may be misunderstood, you may be underestimated, but never let that become your identity. Remember who you are. Remember who sent you. Remember that heaven's approval outweighs the world's applause. You don't need everyone to like you. You just need to stay aligned with the one who loves you perfectly. So the next time someone tries to make you feel less than, whether through words, silence, rejection, or comparison, lift your head. You don't need to defend your worth, it's already been declared. You don't need validation from the crowd when you've already been chosen by the King. Let that truth be your armor. Let it be the reason you smile when others doubt you. Let it be the reason you keep showing up, even when the room doesn't feel welcoming. You are not called to dim your light. You are called to let it shine, boldly, unapologetically, and with love. Because light doesn't compete with darkness, it simply reveals what's true. That's what you're doing. Every time you walk in your calling, every time you choose compassion over competition, every time you stand firm in grace, you're shining, and someone else is watching. Someone else is being reminded that they can rise too. So walk forward, not in fear, but in faith, not in arrogance, but in anointing. Know that you are equipped, you are covered, you are chosen. And when you know who you are in Christ, no voice, no lie, no enemy can ever make you feel small again. Let that be your daily reminder. You carry the light of heaven, and no darkness has the authority to put it out. Some of the most dangerous words you can say about your future are, "It's too late." That sentence has robbed too many people of miracles they were moments away from receiving. I've seen it happen. Dreams put on shelves, purpose buried under disappointment, and passion silenced by the ticking of a clock. But what if I told you time is not a barrier for God? What if your age isn't a limitation, but a setup for something deeper, stronger, and more powerful than you imagined? Because in God's kingdom, it's never too late. As long as you're breathing, He's still building. We live in a world that worships youth, speed, and instant results. But God's timeline doesn't follow human trends. His greatest work is often done in those who've been seasoned by struggle and refined by time. Abraham was nearly 100 when the promise of a son came true. Moses was 80 when he led a nation to freedom. And if you look closely, you'll see a pattern. God uses people who think their time has passed to prove that His power never expires. So stop disqualifying yourself because of your age or your history. You're not behind. You're right where He can show off His glory best. And here's something I've come to realize in my own reflections. Faith that has never been tested is faith that hasn't been proven real. You don't know the strength of your belief until it's stretched, until your prayers are met with silence, until your patience is worn thin, until your dreams feel impossible. That's when faith either breaks or deepens. And if you choose to hold on, even when everything around you says give up, you'll find that what's growing inside you is no longer just hope, it's holy confidence. Don't let your current circumstances define your capacity. God doesn't ask you to bring strength, He asks you to bring surrender. He's not impressed by perfect timing, He's moved by unwavering trust. If He puts something in your heart, it's not random, it's revelation. He's not done writing your story, and you're not too old, too late, or too far gone to see Him move again. So silence that inner voice that says, your best days are behind you. Replace it with truth. God's not finished with me yet. Because He's not. He never was. Miracles don't operate on deadlines. They respond to faith. And the faith that says even now is the kind of faith that unlocks the impossible. Keep walking. Keep believing, the story isn't over. In fact, the best part may still be waiting to begin. Some people think their story ends when they find healing, but in God's plan, that's only the beginning. You weren't just saved for yourself. You weren't just delivered to sit in comfort. You were restored so that you could become a vessel, someone who carries the same healing, the same hope, the same light into the lives of others who are still lost in the dark. Your transformation is not just personal, it's purposeful. And the same God who is healing you from the inside out is preparing to use you as a guidepost for others who need to find their way back home. Let's be honest, healing takes time. And it goes deeper than we often expect. It's not just about being free from physical sickness. Sometimes it's the grief that lingers, the shame that hides, the guilt that speaks when everything else is quiet. God doesn't just want to patch you up. He wants to purify you, to cleanse your mind, restore your heart, renew your spirit, and make you whole again. He's not content with surface-level comfort. He wants full redemption. And when He finishes the work in you, you'll become a testimony that healing is not only possible, it's promised. I've learned in my reflections that God often uses the most wounded people to bring healing to others. Not because they're perfect, but because they understand pain. They recognize what it feels like to be broken, to doubt, to wrestle with silence. And when they speak from a place of empathy, not ego. That's what makes your voice powerful. That's what makes your voice powerful. You don't have to be a preacher or a theologian to lead someone to God. You just have to be honest about where you've been and faithful to say, look what God has done. And don't be surprised when people start asking you for advice, for prayer, for direction. It's not just because you're wise. It's because they see peace in you that they haven't found anywhere else. That's the Holy Spirit moving through you. You've become a living channel of blessing, not because you're flawless, but because you're available. Your surrender created space for God to flow, and now your life is pointing people to the same source that healed you. So don't hide your story, share it. Don't silence your testimony, speak it. You were healed to help others find healing. You were forgiven to help others find grace. You were cleansed so that others could believe they too can be made whole. This is what it means to live a life of purpose, not just to be rescued, but to become a rescuer, to reach back while you move forward, to carry the light that once saved you into the shadows of someone else's storm. And that's not just a calling, that's a legacy, and it begins with the healing you're walking in right now. Some wounds can't be seen on an X-ray or diagnosed by a doctor. They sit deeper, buried beneath smiles tucked behind daily routines. Wounds of the heart, scars of the soul, moments that shook your spirit and left you questioning if joy was still possible. But here's the truth that many overlook. God doesn't just heal bodies, He heals emotions. He restores what fear, heartbreak, and disappointment tried to destroy, and that healing begins the moment you choose to believe that His presence is enough. That even when the world gives you every reason to give up, God whispers one truth that changes everything. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. In my own reflection on these words, I began to understand something I hadn't seen before. Faith isn't just the key to miracles. It's the door to inner peace. It's what opens the heart to restoration. You can sit in a room full of light and still feel dark inside, but the moment you let faith speak louder than fear, the light doesn't just surround you, it fills you. God doesn't just want you to survive what hurt you. He wants to redeem it. He wants to take what drained your joy and turn it into the very thing that brings it back. That's the kind of healing only faith can unlock. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means being free. Free from the grip of what was. Free from the lie that says you'll always feel this way. No, you won't. Because the God who created you has the power to renew you. He's not intimidated by your emotions. He understands them. He doesn't silence your tears. He collects them. And in His time, He turns mourning into dancing, ashes into beauty, heaviness into praise. But you have to let Him in, not just into your plans, but into your pain. That's where the real healing starts. When I said in The Weight of Glory that the Lord meets our doubts and fears with overwhelming simplicity, I meant it. He doesn't respond to panic with pressure. He responds with peace. He doesn't tell you to fix yourself. He tells you to trust Him. And that trust, even if small, creates the space for healing to flow. So if you've been carrying sadness like a second skin, if joy feels like a memory instead of a promise, take heart. You're not alone. You're not forgotten. You're held. Let your faith rise today, not in the hope that life will be perfect, but in the truth that God will be present. And His presence is powerful enough to lift you out of sorrow, renew your soul, and return to you something you thought was lost forever: your joy. Healing is not a myth, it's a process. And it starts with one choice: to believe again. There's a shift that happens in your spirit when you finally realize you've been healed. Not halfway, not in theory, not just on the surface. God has done a deep work in you. The chains that once held your joy hostage have been broken. The guilt that once whispered lies into your soul has been silenced. The weight of your past, it's no longer yours to carry. That version of you, the one weighed down by shame, regret, and brokenness, is not who you are anymore. But here's the key. Healing isn't just something you receive. It's something you walk in. It's not a moment, it's a lifestyle. And it's time for you to step into that truth with your head high, your shoulders back, and your heart wide open. Because freedom doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in a whisper, a moment of clarity, a gentle nudge from the Holy Spirit that says, you don't have to carry that anymore. Too many people ask God for healing and then keep living like they're still broken. They pray for freedom but keep checking the chains. They revisit their failures like a ritual, just to make sure they haven't forgotten how much they messed up. But friend, let me remind you, if God says you're free, then freedom isn't a feeling, it's a fact. It's not based on your mood, it's anchored in His promise. You don't have to keep replaying the pain just to prove it was real. Of course it was. The tears, the heartbreak, the confusion, they happened. But so did the redemption. So did the forgiveness. So did the miracle that brought you to this moment right here. And now the joy is yours to embrace. Not just a little smile at the end of the day. I'm talking about real, honest-to-God joy. The kind that sits in your bone. The kind that makes you walk different. The kind that doesn't need a reason. It's rooted in who God is, not what's happening around you. When I reflect on this deeply, I see that joy isn't just an emotion, it's a spiritual declaration. It says, I believe God more than I believe my past. It says, I've cried my tears, but now I will smile in truth. Joy is an act of rebellion against the enemy. It's you standing in the middle of the storm and choosing to sing anyway. It's you daring to believe that God is still writing good things into your story, even when you haven't seen the full page. You've been through enough. You've carried enough. You've apologized enough. Now it's time to live like someone who knows they've been forgiven. Because when God forgives, He doesn't just wipe the slate clean, He writes a brand new story, one filled with grace, beauty, and renewed purpose. And don't let anyone shame you into staying stuck. Don't let your own thoughts convince you that you need to earn the right to smile. You don't have to prove your worth to walk in the promises of God. His love is not something you earn. It's something you receive. It's not a paycheck, it's a gift. And when you pray, He hears you. He doesn't roll His eyes at your struggles or sigh at your weakness. He listens like a father who's always been waiting for the sound of your voice. He leans in, He draws near, and not only does He listen, He moves. Sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly, but always in the perfect time. You may not see the full picture yet, but make no mistake, your prayers have stirred heaven. There is something sacred about choosing to live like you've been healed, even when the enemy tries to remind you of who you used to be. Because every step you take in faith is a declaration that your past is not your prison, it's your platform. God didn't bring you through that fire for you to hide in the shadows. He brought you through so that your life could shine as a testimony to His power, His mercy, and His ability to restore what was broken. So what does this mean for you now? It means you get to smile again, laugh again, dream again. It means you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. You're not running from your past, you're walking toward your future. And with every step, joy is not just returning, it's rising. You are a new creation, a healed heart, a redeemed soul. And every breath you take in this freedom is a victory over what tried to destroy you. It's time to celebrate the work God has done in you. It's time to wake up each day and say, I am not who I used to be. I am not what happened to me. I am not the mistakes I've made. You are who God says you are, whole, chosen, forgiven, beloved. And yes, there may still be hard days, but you face them now with a different spirit, a spirit that knows God has already walked ahead of you, a heart that believes you're never alone, a soul that is no longer striving to earn grace, but resting in the truth that you already have it. So let the world see your joy, not as proof that life has been easy, but as a testimony that God has been faithful. Let your smile preach louder than your circumstances. Let your peace become your pulpit. Because every time you choose joy, every time you walk in love, every time you believe again, you're not just living, you're leading. You're reminding others that healing is real, that God is still in the business of restoration, that no one is too far, too broken, or too late for grace. Lift your eyes. Let your heart dance. You've been healed. You've been heard. You've been chosen. And now, it's time to live like it. Some days it feels like the world is against you. People misunderstand you. Circumstances push you to the edge. You wonder if anyone sees what you're going through, if anyone even cares. But in those moments, there's one truth that will never change, no matter how loud the chaos gets. You are never separated from God's grace. Not by your failures, not by the voices of your critics, not even by your deepest fears. The grace of God doesn't walk away when things get hard. It draws closer. It wraps around you and says, "You are still mine." Let me remind you, there is nothing more powerful than the love God has for you. It's not fragile. It's not dependent on how perfect you've been this week. His love doesn't weaken under pressure. It doesn't waver when you're tired. It holds, it fights. It surrounds you like a shield. And when others try to tear you down, God steps in. He is not just your comforter. He is your defender. He sees the arrows that were aimed at you. He hears the lies whispered behind your back. And he stands between you and the harm meant for you. You are not unprotected. You are covered. In my reflections, I've come to understand that grace is not a soft cushion. It's a fortress. It's what keeps you standing when the world is trying to knock you down. And it's not just about forgiveness. Grace is the ongoing, unbreakable flow of God's power in your life. It lifts you when you're weak, carries you when you're tired, and speaks truth when every other voice is shouting doubt. And no matter how far you feel from it, it's never far from you. You may have people who walk out on you, friends who switch sides, family who don't believe in you, but God doesn't change his mind about you. He doesn't retreat when the battle heats up. He leans in. He blesses you in plain sight. He prepares a table for you, right in front of those who wanted to see you fail. That's who he is. A God who covers, a Father who lifts, a King who protects. And here's what's even more beautiful. He doesn't just protect you from the outside, he strengthens you from the inside, so that even if the enemy tries again, you'll be stronger than the last time, wiser, calmer, more anchored in truth. That's what grace does. It transforms victims into victors and turns broken hearts into bold witnesses. So the next time you feel small or exposed or attacked, don't panic. Don't shrink back. Remember who fights for you. Remember whose name you carry. You are not defenseless. You are not unworthy. You are chosen, covered, and constantly surrounded by a love so strong that nothing in this world can tear it away from you. Walk in that. Speak from that. Live like someone who knows that even on your worst day, grace has never let go, and it never will. Courage doesn't always look like standing tall with unshakable strength. Sometimes it's choosing to take one more step forward when your heart feels heavy. Sometimes it's praying even when you don't feel a single word is being heard. And sometimes real courage is simply holding on to what you believed yesterday, even when today makes you question everything. That, to me, is the purest form of faith. Not the absence of doubt, but the decision to keep walking in spite of it. When I reflected deeply on this truth, I wrote in Mere Christianity that faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. It means your emotions don't get the final word. Your fears don't have the authority to rewrite your convictions. And your current season doesn't cancel out what God already confirmed in your spirit. Because the truth is, if your faith was only real when everything felt easy, it wouldn't be faith at all, it would be convenience. Faith, real faith, is forged in the fire. It is made in the moments where you feel forgotten, but still choose to believe that you are held. It is born when the road gets darker, but you keep walking because something deep inside you knows who you are and whose you are. That is where spiritual courage lives, not in the absence of struggle, but in your response to it. And here's the beauty. You weren't made to crawl through life hoping for scraps of encouragement. You were born for more than survival, You were chosen to be a warrior, not the kind who never bleeds, but the kind who knows how to fight from the knees up, the kind who prays even when their voice shakes, the kind who stands even when no one else does. You, child of God, carry a strength this world cannot explain, because it's not of this. It's divine, it's eternal, and it's within you. You see, the enemy isn't afraid of your talent. He's not scared of your success. What terrifies him is your unwavering faith, the kind that won't back down even when all odds say it should, the kind that still speaks God's name even in silence, the kind that keeps sowing seeds of hope in dry land. That's why you face pressure. That's why the attacks come, because you carry light, and light, even a flicker of it, always threatens the darkness. So what do you do when you feel weak? You remind yourself that strength isn't the absence of tears, it's the presence of trust. You go back to what God promised, even if your emotions tell a different story. You stop letting feelings define your foundation, and you let truth become your compass. You remember that your faith doesn't have to feel big to be real. It just has to be rooted. And if it's rooted in God, it will hold. And don't forget this. You know who you are. You've been through battles that should have broken you. You've overcome days you thought would never end. And here you are, still breathing, still believing. That alone is proof that you are built different, that your identity is not in your struggles but in your Savior. You are not the defeated, you are the redeemed. You are not wandering aimlessly, you are walking with purpose. So lift your eyes, straighten your back. You're not just anyone, you are a warrior of the living God. And warriors don't run from the fight, they rise in it. Not because they're fearless, but because they're anchored. And your anchor is unshakable. The winds may howl, the waves may rise, but you'll walk on water if that's what God calls you to do. Not because you feel strong, but because you trust the one who says, "Come." You move not by your own willpower, but by grace, and grace will carry you farther than fear ever could. This is your moment to move. This is your invitation to walk boldly again, to silence the doubts, to override the fear, to step out with faith, not perfect, not polished, but real. And real faith changes everything. You already know the truth. You've seen the evidence in your own story. Now it's time to live like it. Let your life preach what your words may not always say. Let your walk declare, "I believe, no matter what I feel." That's courage. That's strength. That's faith. And that's exactly what the world needs more of today. People who know who they are in Christ and are not afraid to walk like it. So go. Walk forward. Walk strong. Walk like a warrior who trusts the God who goes before you and stands beside you. You are not alone, and you were never meant to be. You've come a long way, and if you're still listening, I want you to know something that I believe with all my heart. You are stronger than you think. Not because you've never fallen, but because you've chosen to rise. Not because the road has been easy, but because you never stopped walking it. That alone sets you apart. That alone makes you powerful. And that alone means you are right where God wants you to be, on the edge of something new, something better, something only faith can take you into. You see, real strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet endurance. Sometimes it's just showing up, praying again, forgiving again, breathing again. And if you've done that, you've already won battles that others can't even see. I've come to understand that faith is not about perfection, it's about persistence. It's about trusting God even when your eyes can't see what your heart knows. It's walking through fire and still believing rain will come. It's hearing silence and still believing He's speaking. So let me remind you today, keep going, keep believing, keep standing. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are not weak for having moments of doubt. You are human, but you are a human filled with divine power. And that makes you dangerous to fear, to hopelessness, to anything that tries to pull you away from God's purpose. Don't let the weight of today stop you from stepping into the victory of tomorrow. What God has planned for you is not behind you, it's ahead. And yes, it may require more faith than you've ever had, it may require more patience than you want to give, but it will be worth it, because God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't overlook obedience. He doesn't abandon the faithful. If you keep walking with Him, you will reach the place He's prepared for you. That's not just a hope, it's a promise. I've learned through my journey, as I wrote in Mere Christianity, that faith is the art of holding on to what your reason once accepted in spite of your changing moods. That truth carries me even now, and it should carry you too. Hold on to what you believe, especially when the world tries to convince you otherwise. You were never called to follow the crowd. You were called to follow Christ. And that road, while narrow, leads to everything your soul has been longing for. And now, as you move forward from this message, I want to encourage you to carry this fire with you. Don't just listen and forget. Let these words become part of how you live. Speak life over your situation. Speak courage into your heart. And when fear tries to creep back in, remind yourself who you belong to. You are a child of the King. You are anointed. You are destined. And yes, you are already equipped for the battle ahead. If this message has stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you of your strength or helped you see your worth or gave you the clarity you've been praying for, then I want to invite you to become part of something bigger than just one video. Join a community of people walking by faith, just like you. A community that seeks to go deeper, not just in words, but in action, purpose, and spiritual growth. So here's how you do that. Take a moment right now and press the like button. It might seem small, but it lets us know you're with us. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button so you never miss another message that speaks to your soul. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Just type 7777. That's our way of saying, I'm part of this. I'm choosing faith. I'm moving forward. Every number typed is a testimony in motion. Every comment is a declaration that you're not walking this path alone. This is more than content. This is a calling. And together we are learning to live with boldness, with joy, and with unshakable faith. We're discovering how God moves in real lives, in real situations, and how His presence transforms everything it touches. So stand tall, take the next step, and believe, truly believe, that the best is still ahead. You are not just a survivor, you are a victor. And this journey you're on, it ends in glory. Let's keep walking. Let's keep growing, and let's keep showing the world what it means to live chosen.